You show up on time. You do the work. You don't cause problems. You follow the rules they gave you on day one, and you've been following them relentlessly ever since. And somewhere in the back of your mind, you believe that if you keep being reliable, the company will take care of you. They won't. Not because they're evil, but because these 7 traps sitting inside your job right now are specifically designed to make sure you stay exactly where you are now. But let's start with an uncomfortable truth. Here's the thing most people believe. If you're a good employee, the company protects you. That's the deal, right? You give them loyalty, reliability, results, and in return, they give you stability, raises, opportunities, security. That deal sounds fair. It isn't. Because you're not operating in a relationship. You're operating in a system. And systems don't reward fairness. They reward leverage. The employee who understands how the system actually works holds leverage. The employee who just does their job and hopes for the best, they're the most vulnerable person in the building, and they have no idea. The 7 traps I'm going to walk you through aren't dramatic. They're not illegal. Most of them aren't even visible until you know what you're looking for. But once you see them, you can't unsee them. And more importantly, you can stop walking straight into them. Trap 1. The competence trap. You are good at your job. That is a problem. Here's what actually happens when you're reliably excellent at your current role. Your manager stops thinking about moving you because moving you creates a problem for them. They have to find a replacement. They have to train someone. They have to absorb the gap. And that gap is their problem, not yours. So instead, they give you more responsibility, harder problems, bigger accounts. Your job quietly doubles in scope while your title stays exactly the same. They call it being trusted. It's not trust, it's convenience. Here's what no one tells you. Your performance reviews evaluate how well you do your current job, not how ready you are for the next one. Those are 2 completely different things, and the people making decisions about your career are only measuring one of them. Being excellent at the wrong level is just a slower way to stay stuck. Trap 2. The silence tax. Every month you don't tell your employer what you want, they assume you're happy with what you have. This sounds obvious. It doesn't feel obvious when you're in it, because most people believe that asking for more, asking for a raise, asking for a promotion, asking for a better assignment, makes them look greedy, or ungrateful, or difficult. So they stay quiet, they keep their head down, they perform, and they wait for someone to notice. Here's what actually happens when you stay quiet. Leadership fills in the blank. And they always fill it in the same way. She's fine where she is. He doesn't seem like he wants more. They're comfortable. Silence gets misread as satisfaction. And satisfied employees don't get moved. They get managed. The silence tax is real. You pay it in missed promotions, flat salaries, and opportunities that went to someone louder, not someone better. Trap 3. The loyalty illusion. You've been at your company for 4 years, maybe 6, maybe 10, and somewhere along the way you started to feel like that history means something. Like you've earned a kind of protection that newer employees haven't. You haven't. Here's how loyalty actually works in most organizations. The company values what you contribute today, not what you contributed 3 years ago, not how much you've given, not how much you've sacrificed. Tenure is not an asset, it's a comfort, and comfort is not the same as security. When restructuring happens, and it always happens eventually, the question leadership asks is not who has been here longest. The question is who creates the most disruption if we remove them. Those are 2 very different lists. And loyal, long-tenured employees who've been easy to manage, they're almost never on the protected list. Loyalty that isn't strategic is just exposure with a longer timeline. Let me tell you about a woman named Diane. Diane had been at her company for 8 years. She was the person everyone called when something broke, when a client got difficult, when a new hire needed onboarding. She stayed late. She never complained. She genuinely loved her team. When her department restructured, Diane was let go. She was shocked. Her manager was apologetic. HR called it a business decision. and everyone agreed she had been a valued employee. But here's what actually happened. Diane had spent 8 years becoming essential to her current role and invisible to every other one. She had no visibility above her direct manager. She had no documented record of her contributions beyond her immediate team. She had never asked for a promotion, never pushed for a raise that matched her responsibilities, never made her ambitions known to anyone with the power to act on them. She had been a perfect employee by every standard she'd been given. She just hadn't been given the real standards. Diane isn't unusual, she's the rule, not the exception. And the traps she fell into are sitting inside most workplaces right now, waiting. Trap 4. The invisible work trap. Work that isn't seen doesn't count. This one is hard to accept because it feels deeply unfair. You solved a problem no one else could solve. You held a project together that would have collapsed without you. You trained 3 people who are now getting more credit than you. And none of it shows up anywhere. Here's the mechanics of how this works. Your manager has a vague sense of your value, not a precise record. A feeling built from fragments. What you said in the last meeting, whether you pushed back on something recently, whether they've heard your name from someone above them. If your best work happens quietly, in the background, without updates or documentation or any trail that travels upward, it might as well not have happened. The people who get ahead don't just do better work, they make sure the right people know about the work they've done. That's not bragging, that's survival. Trap 5. The market value freeze. Your employer knows what you're worth on the outside. You probably don't. Here's what no one tells you. Companies run compensation analyses. They know the market rate for your role. They know exactly how your salary compares to what a competitor would pay to bring you in. And they will pay you as little above that floor as they can get away with, until you show them you know the number too. Employees who never look at the market never negotiate from real information. They negotiate from gratitude, or from fear, or from whatever percentage their manager says is standard, which is never the real ceiling. The moment you find out what your role actually pays at other companies, the conversation changes. Because now you're not asking for a favor. You're discussing market reality. That's a completely different dynamic, and your employer has been hoping you never find out the difference. Trap 6. The process protection trap. Your employer has processes. You follow them. You assume following the process is the right move. Sometimes it is, and sometimes the process is exactly what keeps a problem from getting solved. Specifically, the problem you're experiencing. HR is a perfect example. HR does not work for you. HR works for the company. Their job is to protect the organization from liability, manage risk, and document outcomes. When you bring a complaint to HR, the question they're answering is not how do we help this employee? It's how do we handle this situation in a way that protects the company? Those 2 questions sometimes lead to the same outcome. Often they don't. This doesn't mean you should never use HR. It means you should understand what you're actually doing when you do. You're initiating a formal process with a party that represents institutional interests, not yours. Going in without understanding that isn't brave. It's just unprepared. Trap 7. The replaceable by default trap. You've been told that being irreplaceable is the goal. It isn't. The real goal is being valuable enough to negotiate with and replaceable enough that leaving is a real option you can actually take. Here's the trap. When you build your entire career value inside one company, one team, one set of systems, one manager's perception of you, you become dependent. And dependence destroys leverage. The employees with the most power in any workplace are the ones who could leave and land somewhere else at the same level or higher. Their employer knows this. It changes how they're treated, what they're offered, how quickly complaints get addressed. And here's what no one says out loud. The best way to be treated well at a company is to be someone who doesn't need to stay. That means keeping your skills sharp outside your current role, building relationships outside your current team, staying visible in your industry, Making sure your value isn't only readable to one person in one building. Because the moment your only option is to stay, you've already lost the negotiation. Here's the thing underneath all 7 of these traps. They don't require anyone to be malicious. Your manager doesn't have to be plotting against you. HR doesn't have to be corrupt. The company doesn't have to be evil. The system just has to be a system. And systems optimize for whoever designed them. These traps exist because they're convenient, because they keep labor costs down, because they reward compliance and punish ambiguity, because they rely on employees not knowing the rules of a game they're already playing. The hardest part isn't learning the rules. The hardest part is accepting that the version of work you were taught, show up, work hard, be loyal, be patient, was always incomplete. Not wrong exactly. Just missing the half that benefits you. You were given a rulebook with pages torn out, and no one told you. None of these traps are inevitable. Knowing about the competence trap means you start building visibility, not just performance. Knowing about the silence tax means you start telling people what you want, out loud, to the people who can actually act on it. Knowing about the loyalty illusion means you stop confusing time served with security earned. Knowing about invisible work means you document, communicate, and make sure your contributions travel upward. Knowing about market value means you run the numbers before you walk into any compensation conversation. Knowing about HR means you understand what you're actually starting when you use that process. And knowing about the replaceable trap means you keep your options alive, not because you're planning to leave, but because the option to leave is the only leverage that actually works. You don't need to become someone different. You don't need to play dirty or become someone who treats people as stepping stones. You just need to stop playing a version of the game that was designed for you to lose. The company already knows the rules. Now you do too.